Senator Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director Comey. There have been press reports that the President, in addition to asking you to drop the Flynn investigation, has asked other senior intelligence officials to take steps which would tend to undermine the investigation into Russia. There's been reports that he's asked DNI Coates and Admiral Rogers to make public statements exonerating him or taking the pressure off him, and also reports about Admiral Rogers and Director Pompeo to intervene and reach out to the FBI and ask them. Are you aware of any of these, or do you have any information with respect to any of these allegations?
I don't. I'm aware of the public reporting, but I had no contact, no conversation with any of those leaders about that subject.
Thank you. You have testified that you interpret the discussion with the President about Flynn as a direction to stop the investigation. Is that correct?
Yes.
You've testified that the President asked you to lift the cloud by essentially making public statements exonerating him and perhaps others. You refused, correct?
I didn't do it. I didn't refuse the President. I told him we would see what we could do, and then the second time he called, I told him in substance, that's something your lawyer will have to take up with the Justice Department.
And part of the underlying logic was that, we've discussed many times throughout this morning, is the duty to correct. That is one of a theoretical issue, but also a very practical issue. Was there your feeling that the direction of the investigation could, in fact, include the President?
Well, in theory, I mean, as I explained, the concern of one of my senior leader colleagues was, if you're looking at potential coordination between the campaign and Russia, the person at the head of the campaign is the candidate. So logically, this person argued, the candidate's knowledge, understanding will logically become a part of your inquiry if it proceeds. And so I understood that argument. My view was that what I said to the President was accurate and fair to him. I resisted the idea of publicly saying it, although if the Justice Department had wanted to, that I would have done it, because of the duty to correct and the slippery slope problem.
And again, also, you've testified that the President asked you repeatedly to be loyal to him, and you responded you would be honestly loyal, which is, I think, your way of saying, I'll be honest and I'll be the head of the FBI and independent. Is that fair?
Correct. I tried honest first, and also, I mean, you see it in my testimony, I also tried to explain to him why it's in his interest and every president's interest for the FBI to be a part, in a way, because its credibility is important to a president and to the country. And so I tried to hold the line. It got very awkward, and I then said, you'll always have honesty from me. He said honest loyalty, and then I acceded to that as a way to end this awkwardness.
At the culmination of all these events, you're summarily fired without any explanation or anything else.
Well, there was an explanation. I just don't buy it.
Well, yes. So you're fired. So do you believe that you were fired because you refused to take the President's direction? Is that the ultimate reason?
I don't know for sure. I know I was fired. Again, I take the President's words. I know I was fired because of something about the way I was conducting the Russia investigation was in some way putting pressure on him, in some way irritating him, and he decided to fire me because of that. Now, I can't go farther than that.
The Russian investigation, as you've pointed out, and as all my colleagues have reflected, is one of the most serious hostile acts against this country in our history, undermining the very core of our democracy and our elections. It is not a discrete event. It will likely occur. It's probably being prepared now for 18 and 20 and beyond. And yet, the President of the United States fires you because, in your own words, some relation to this investigation. And then he shows up in the Oval Office with the Russian foreign minister, first after classifying you as crazy and a real nut job, which I think you've effectively disproved this morning. He said, I face great pressure because of Russia. That's taken off. your conclusion would be that the president, I would think, is downplaying the seriousness of this threat. In fact, took specific steps to stop a thorough investigation of the Russian influence, and also, from what you've said or what was been said this morning, doesn't seem to be particularly interested in these hostile threats by the Russians. Is that fair?
I don't know that I can agree to that level of detail. There's no doubt that it's a fair judgment. It's my judgment that I was fired because of the Russia investigation. I was fired in some way to change, or the endeavor was to change the way the Russia investigation was being conducted. That is a very big deal, and not just because it involves me. The nature of the FBI and the nature of its work requires that it not be the subject of political consideration. And then on top of that, you have the Russia investigation itself is vital because of the threat. And I know I should have said this earlier, but it's obvious. If any Americans were part of helping the Russians do that to us, that is a very big deal. And I'm confident that if that is the case, Director Mueller will find that evidence.
Finally, the president tweeted that James Comey better hope that there are no tapes of our conversation before he starts leaking to the press. Was that a rather unsubtle attempt to intimidate you from testifying and intimidate anyone else who seriously crosses his path of not doing it?
I'm not going to sit here and try to interpret the president's tweets. To me, its major impact was, as I said, occurred to me in the middle of the night. Holy cow, there might be tapes. And if there are tapes, it's not just my word against his on the direction to get rid of the Flynn investigation.
Thank you very much.